2020 Zoning Hearing Board meeting to order. Our first item of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me if you'd like to. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Turning to the agenda, first item is appeal number 3047. The applicant, David Hoffman, property located at 767 and 769 Newtown Road, request an extension of time for the obtaining a permit under section 280-144 of the zoning code for an additional 6 months to May 4th, 2021. Mr. Brosman?
Good evening, Mr. Riley. I'm George Brosman. I had represented David Hoffman on this application. This is one of the old historic buildings on Ardrossan along Newtown Road. He has a nice project to do there. The board granted relief. With the COVID situation, he was delayed, but he has now, I believe, made application for the township grading permit. That's expected to take some time, and it's the township policy that he can't really apply for the building permit until he gets the grading permit. So that is why we're seeking the 6-month extension.
Okay, and do you anticipate any further extension requests, or is the project far along enough now that this will be the last request?
I think this will be it. As I said, if he gets his grading permit and can get that in time to get the building permit, I believe that'll be enough time. If not, it wouldn't be much more, but we're hopeful he has applied for that, that he'll get everything he needs in time.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from members of the board on this request?
No.
Okay, hearing none, we'll call the vote. We'll again do it by name. Ms. Foreman, yes or no on the extension? Yes. Mr. Nagel?
No.
Mr. Delizia?
Yes.
And I'm a yes.
I'm sorry. I have no objection.
Okay. Okay. So the vote is 4-0, granting the extension. Thank you very much on that item. Okay, Norma, this is the one where I'm going to sort of wing the typical reading of the notice into the record. So you've got the full notice. The next item is appeal number 3060. The applicant, West Wayne Avenue Ventures LLC, property located at 108 West Wayne Avenue and zoned WBOD Wayne Business Overlay District. Applicant proposes a modification to the existing property. This is where I'm winging it, Norma. Mm-hmm. Applicant proposes a modification to the existing use of the property and to make related improvements on the property located at 108 West Wayne Avenue, located in the South Wayne Municipal Lot / Post Office Special Use Area within the WBOD. The applicant requests a special exception under Code Section 280-101A and/or to change the use of the first floor of the building from a mail sorting facility to office use, or alternatively, a variance from Code Section 280-53.17C3 with, no, you don't. I'm sorry. Strike that, Norma. Sorry. So office use, we're picking up from office use, or to the extent required, other variances as are set forth in the amended application for zoning relief and as will be presented by council this evening. And then That's it. Mr. Brosman, I've butchered that pretty nicely, but this application has had a rather tortured way to us. So I'm going to let you speak for about 30 minutes or so, and then we'll catch back up.
George, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Riley. Good evening. I'm George Brosman. I represent the applicant West Wayne Ventures LLC, which is the owner of the property at 108 West Wayne Avenue, which is the subject of this application. I think everybody knows this property. It's the vacant one-story building located behind the Wayne Post Office and next to the Radnor Library. I'm here this evening with one of the principals of my client, Wade McDevitt, who's a Radnor Township resident. I think we'll be joined by the other principal, Eli Kahn, but he hasn't arrived yet. We'll have some testimony from Wade, and our engineer, Rob Lambert, will provide some testimony. And I was speaking with Kevin and Ian earlier. We'd like to do some screen sharing with Rob to go through some exhibits. And we have Frank Tavani, who is a transportation engineer who has done some parking analysis in the area. We're here this evening because my clients had purchased this property and they're seeking to rehabilitate the building and use it for offices, which we believe, and as they'll tell you, will be a complementary use to some of the other uses in the Wayne Business Overlay District where the property is. As Mr. Riley noted, there's been some changes with this application. The good news is for the board, I suppose, that we tried to do all that before we reached you. But the bad news is it got a little complicated, which I apologize for. But basically, I think it's pretty simple now. When we originally came forward with the application, my clients had proposed to add a second floor to the building. It's a one-story building. And although there was a good amount of support for that, there were some people who had expressed concerns about parking in the area. And to address that concerns, my client decided to eliminate the proposed second story and just proceed with a proposal to rehabilitate the first floor. We had presented this plan when it was a two-story plan to the Radnor Township Planning Commission, who did recommend approval. We had also been before the Township's Community Development Committee, which is a committee of the Board of Commissioners. And we went in front of the Board of Commissioners on at least 2 occasions. And the commissioners ultimately decided earlier this month, after we had removed the proposed second story, not to send the township solicitor to oppose the application. We have an exhibit package that Rob will go through. We have as exhibits A1 through A3, and you don't have to really go through these, Rob. We'll just put them in the record. They're the applications as have been amended. A1 was the original one we filed, and then A3 is the clarified and amended application where I tried to remove all reference to the previously proposed second floor. I think I hit everything on that. The proposal, I think, has 3 basic zoning issues that we'll go through. One is in the special use area of the and other areas of the Wayne Business Overlay District. Office is not a permitted use on a first floor. It's permitted in the area in the district, but it's supposed to be on a second story. And of course, we don't have a second story. You'll hear some testimony, and probably the board is familiar. This building was built for and was served as many years as an industrial type building. It was a mail sorting facility for the U.S. Postal Service. And that operation relocated to the township, and the building is.
You're going to address.
Why? Whoa. People have to go on mute.
So we believe that the industrial use could be considered a non-conforming use. So we applied for the special exception to change from a non-conforming industrial use to an office use. Alternatively, we asked for a variance, And we believe that a variance would be warranted if one was needed because of the unique configuration and location of the building. The second issue we have, second and third issue really relate to parking. One deals with the amount of parking, and the second is more technical and deals with the location of parking. With regard to the amount of the parking, like most of the properties in the Wayne Business Overlay District, the property is non-conforming to the number of required parking spaces. Our testimony will show that there's limited space to add parking on the property, and that the project will substantially reduce the degree of the parking nonconformity. And also through Mr. Tavani, that there's ample parking nearby. The more technical relief, there's a provision in the Wayne Business Overlay District 280-5312 that says that parking shouldn't be located between the front of the building and the street. This building has two street frontages, West Wayne Avenue, which is where the property is addressed. It's 108 West Wayne Ave. And then it also has frontage on South Wayne Avenue, which has a loading dock and has more been the back of house operations. So we were contending that for purposes of this provision, the South Wayne frontage should not be considered a front of the building. But even if it was, there's been parking over in that area, and then the property would be non-conforming to the requirement that parking shouldn't be in front of the building. And of course, this is the only place on the property where there's really space to put parking. So those are the three types of relief we need. With regard to the number of parking spaces required, we'll have some testimony on the calculations from Mr. Lambert. In my exhibit package, you'll see at Exhibit A4, I found several of the old zoning board decisions that had been granted over the years for many of the buildings in Wayne. And almost all of them had granted some kind of relief with regard to parking nonconformity, allowing buildings to be converted that had no parking and that were non-conforming to parking, and basically allowing those buildings to continue to be put to productive use and maintain the parking nonconformity they had. They weren't required to, get a variance from all of the parking they needed. They were allowed to maintain the parking nonconformity, and if they were increasing the nonconformity, in a few of the cases, a variance was actually granted. I won't go through all of these here. I summarized them on this short bullet point memo that's at A4. And behind A4 is copies of the decisions. I think one of the more relevant decisions is involving the Suburban Publications building. That was a case where the board was confronted with a building non-conforming to parking. The use was being changed from the old suburban use to a mix of retail and food and office. And the board found that, the parking nonconformity could be continued, that relief wasn't needed there. So that's all there for you. And basically, we contend that, we don't need relief. We're greatly minimizing the parking nonconformity. But of course, like many of the properties in Wayne, there's just a limited place to put the parking as a practical matter. So with that introduction, I would like to call Wade McDevitt, I think will be our main witness.
Good evening.
Mr. McDevitt, you raise your right hand. I'll swear you in. You do solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
I do.
Thank you. State your full name for the record, please.
Wade Langern McDevitt.
Thank you.
And Wade, you were at Exhibit A6. Is this a summary of your background?
Yeah, certainly. So I'm the founder and CEO of the McDevitt Company, a company I established in 1996. We have three divisions. We're one of the largest retail tenant representation firms in the country. It's a global platform with 8 offices around the world. We have a second division, which is landlord visioning and leasing.
Sir, can you slow down a little bit for me?
Certainly. We have a second division, which does landlord visioning merchandising and leasing, where we handle on average around 2 million plus square feet at any given time. And then our third division, which is what brings me here this evening, is a development platform, which we have been involved with for the past six plus years.
And Wade, are you one of the principals of the ownership entity for the property?
I am.
And did your group purchase this property in October 2019?
We did.
Rob, if you could go to Exhibit A7, which is an aerial.
Hey, guys, can I ask a formal request here? Because I have to run,
Yes,
but I
yes.
wanted to see if I could get a statement, and I apologize for.
I'm sorry, who's speaking?
It's Ken Kearns.
That's
I reside at 221 Walnut Avenue in Wayne. I am also the on the board of the Wayne Business Association. And
Okay,
I'm,
sir.
also
Excuse me.
the owner of the property that was cited in a previous exhibit at 134 North Wayne Avenue, which is also non-conforming, known as a suburban building.
Okay, excuse me for a minute. This is Norman, this is John Rayleigh. Mr. Kearns, what is your connection with the applicant? Because the applicant is in the middle of presenting its case to the board.
Yes, I apologize. I have an appointment at 7:30, so I wanted to make a public statement on behalf of the WBA.
Well, I'm sympathetic. Is Deanna Doan available to make that statement?
Is what I'm sorry?
This is the WBA presenting a statement?
Yes,
there-
well, I was going to, I was doing it on behalf of 3 different entities that I'm associated with that are part of this discussion.
Okay, well, we're not at public comment quite yet.
I realize that. I'm sorry.
Okay, so thank you.
I don't object if the chairman didn't object. I understand Mr. Kearns has to leave, but I leave it up to you.
Was this need communicated to our solicitor or to Mr. Kachansky prior to the meeting?
It's the first I'm hearing of it, Mr. Chairman.
No, Mr. Chairman, it's the first I'm hearing of it as well.
I'm going to leave it up to the board. It's not my preferred way of doing things. I mean, I'd always like to, swing by and drop in my thoughts and then leave and do other things. But that's typically not how our meetings are conducted.
I apologize. That's not the intent. I'm just a.
Well, no, I believe actually it is the intent because you want to make your statement on your schedule. So, and to characterize it as anything other than that, I think is disingenuous. But leaving that aside, if the board doesn't have any other problems with Mr. Kearns sharing his thoughts with us on this application, which he hasn't seen yet, or has not seen the full presentation of, I'll allow Mr. Kearns to proceed.
I don't have any objection.
This is Brad. I do. I think we should be following our procedure as we always do. Otherwise, this request will happen every single time. And
which is why we have the procedure we have. So, Mr. Kearns, Mr. Kearns, you're going to have to wait for public comment.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Brosman, please continue. I apologize for that.
Not a problem for us. Thank you. Wade, this is Exhibit A7. This is an aerial photo. Is the property highlighted in yellow here?
Yes, it is.
I think the board is very familiar with this area, so unless there's any questions, we can move on. Wade, what's your understanding of the history of the development and use of the property in question?
The property was developed, I believe, in the 50s. It was purpose-built as a postal sorting facility and leased by the U.S. Post Office. It was vacated at some point approximately 9-10 years ago. It was a short-term lease with the Radnor Library that used it for storage while they were redeveloping their structure.
And did you have an understanding of how many employees had worked at the facility at its peak?
Yes, 54 employees worked in the sorting center when it was operating.
And To your knowledge, has it been vacant since the postal service moved out?
Other than the short-term lease that was done with the library, yes, it has been.
Okay. I'd like to move, Mr. Lambert, if you could move us to Exhibit A8. A8, for the record, has A through F, which is a series of photographs of the existing building and proposed renderings. Wade, I'd like you to walk us through those, referring to the exhibit number on each, if you would, starting with A8A.
Yes, this is a photograph taken from the West Wayne Avenue elevation, standing in front of the library, looking southeast at the corner of the structure. And then in the distance, you see the side elevation of the library where that juts out as well. This is in Exhibit A8B. This is a rendering that we had done for the original proposed plan, which was the two-level structure, which anticipated us adding a second floor to the existing structure, which has since been removed as a concession in the interest of trying to expedite this process and to accommodate some of the concerns, to address some of the concerns that have been expressed by the commission.
A8C got made small.
A8C, yeah, I was going to say, A8C is the rendering of the building, the existing structure as we propose to be redeveloped as a single structure, as a single level structure, just utilizing the existing frame. This is a perspective from South Wayne Avenue with your back towards the post office, photograph of the existing structure. It shows the connection to the post office and the post office building as well, and the parking field that sits in front of our property.
And for the record, that was A8D.
Pardon me, 8AD.
Hey, Mr. Brosman, this is Brad DeLizia. For A8C, if you mind just going back, is that an entrance on A8C?
A8C, there was a side entrance.
The little one.
Yes, it was a side entrance that we had originally proposed as a possible second means of egress or potential tenant entry. At this point, we anticipate that's just going to be an emergency egress.
Okay, so it won't be an entrance, I guess, from the library coming in.
No.
Promoting people to park in the library parking lot. That's, I think, my issue.
No, that was intended. Originally, it was a potential entry for a ground floor tenant as a second means of egress. It's no longer anticipated that would be what the situation or the arrangement.
Okay.
As I mentioned, I can't see the exhibit number for this one. 8AD is a photograph from the South Wayne Avenue, looking west with your back towards the firehouse. Shows the parking field and the post office structure as well.
And I'm sorry, on that one,
Yes,
is all of that parking part of the parcel that's in question this evening?
Yes, everything that you see with cars currently parked on it there is a portion of the property to the far right in this photograph, contiguous to the post office. It's a triangular shape that is not part of our parcel, but there are no cars parked there, and it hasn't been used for parking either. It was more or less a turnaround space for trucks pulling into the post office at one time.
This is Brad again. It seems as if the two buildings are connected. Is that in fact true?
No, they are connected. We don't own the parcel. That neck or that connection is owned by the post office. It dead ends into our structure where it's sealed off.
Okay, so that is going to remain in the plans.
Yes, sir.
Okay, got it.
It's a part of the post office structure unless they intend on doing something with it that we're not aware of.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. This is a 8AE is a rendering, once again, showing the property as we originally had proposed as a two-level structure with almost a full floor on the over the existing floor. We had a setback along the eastern elevation you see on the north end of the building, which provided for a terrace area. That was to address some zoning issues that would allow us to glaze that elevation as opposed to being a solid elevation. This was, we'd shown two entrances. We had, as once said, this is conceptual, but the idea was that the main core for the structure would be that entrance you see to the left, a slightly different shade of brick, and that was going to be the elevator core to access the second level. that the mini rendering is the 8AF, which we thought would make it really dramatic by making it small, is what we're currently proposing after we've removed that what had been proposed as a second floor. So that's as we imagine it to look once we've completed our renovations and investments. With additional, part of our plan also involves creating some additional pervious surface and greening more of the space, greening more of the site than currently is. Removing some of the macadam, you see a green belt along the eastern elevation of the structure. That would be an addition as well.
And could we move on to A9?
Yeah, if you could reduce that a little bit. So yeah, thank you.
So this, go ahead. This is conceptual of the floor plan, is that correct?
A9 is conceptual of the floor plan. This is inside the existing outline of the existing structure. And as I say, we're utilizing the existing structure for the most part.
And this, to Mr. Delicia's point, shows kind of what the rendering did. The main entrance and lobby is really on the South Wayne side, correct?
Is on the South Wayne side, correct? On the South Wayne side, at the south end of the building.
This is Brad here. Mr. McDevitt, are you seeing this as a single tenant building?
We are.
We are. So do you have contingency plans for a dual tenant or 3-tenant or?
No, I mean, full transparency, we may put a family office in for my family, may occupy a very small portion of the space, around 400 square feet, but this will be 99% a single tenant structure. We don't anticipate, we already have a tenant.
Oh, great. Okay.
And that is currently in business in Wayne and has been for 20 plus years, has grown out of their space and doesn't want to leave Wayne, and we don't want them to leave Wayne. One of the reasons we made the concession that we made was really an accommodation for their timing. They're anxious to get going, and we are as well. So we were willing to make that compromise to facilitate what we would hope to be
That's great.
A thorough approval.
That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome. The doors you had referenced, you mentioned before, Mr. Delizia, are here as well. You see the second means of egress, the additional means of egress, the 2 additional.
Sir, can you really try and slow down a little bit for me?
Yeah, it's not
It's
my
really hard.
It's not my
I know.
I'll do my best. I'm sorry. Been fighting for years. You'll see the 2 additional means of egress along the western elevation of the structure. Those are emergency egress points only.
And I mentioned in the opening remarks, one of the issues is, can we have an office use on a one-story building in the Wayne Business Overlay District? Can you explain why you and Eli believe an office is appropriate for this building and this location?
Yes, absolutely. Also, I just want to back to Mr. Delizio's concerns regarding the door, not concerns, question regarding the door at the northwest corner facing towards the library. We had at one point considered that to possibly be our handicap access as well. We've not sorted that out, but that was also potentially an opportunity for that as well. I'm sorry, George, your question is why we believe the property is best suited for office use?
Yeah, why you're proposing an office, given the nature of the building and location.
Certainly, there are a number of things that we take into consideration. One being, one and probably one of the most important ones is the current state of the economy and of the retail sector. There are currently, at a minimum, 18 retail vacancies in the Wayne business area. We don't believe adding additional 10,000 square feet of retail to the Wayne marketplace would be advisable at this point. Additionally, we think that our parking demands are complementary to the existing parking strains of the township, being that our parking mostly occurs during weekdays, daytime, between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. Your heaviest parking burdens are occurring in the evenings and weekends when this building will most likely be vacant. So that comes to take into consideration as well. Additionally, this is an elevated structure on the West Wayne elevation. Yes, you come in at grade on the West Wayne elevation. On the South Wayne elevation, it's an elevated structure. Typically, elevated spaces don't make for good retail. It's kind of the golden rule of retailing is you want to be at grade. This is not at grade. The other golden rule of retail is you want reflective retail, which means you want retail all around you to create critical mass. Other than the pizza parlor and the small barber shop, there really isn't reflective retail across the street. when I reference the street, that's the South Wayne Avenue elevation. And across North Wayne Avenue, West Wayne Avenue, there is no retail there either. And other uses, we certainly don't want to bring an industrial use back into the middle of Wayne. We don't think that's complementary to the environment that we have so thoughtfully created in the village. Additionally, we don't think the building is really that well suited the ground floor for residential. Ground floor residential is challenging, and we don't think the architecture really is, and the layout is best suited for that.
And you've hit on, I'll draw the board to take notice of the special use district use provisions. 280-5317C allows very few uses at all in the district. And Wade, you've hit on several of them. One of the only uses left are facilities serving the public. And the examples they give, I won't name them all, but library, post office, senior center, fire company, municipal building, surface parking area, other civic uses. Is the immediate area already have a lot of these type of uses?
It does. Most of those boxes are already checked, I would say.
Now, Mr. Tavani's going to talk when it's his turn about some parking analysis he did, you know, as an engineer, but based on your familiarity with the area, I know you said you lived in the township, and your experience, and I think you touched on this before about the complementary uses, but do you envision this causing a practical parking problem in the area?
I do not. And as I said, as a resident and someone who spends a great deal of time in downtown Wayne, I do not anticipate this being a parking issue. Considering, as I mentioned earlier, that the majority, if not all of our parking demand occurs weekdays between 8 and 5.
Mr. Brosman, it's Brad DeLizzi again. Did you look, I mean, clearly you're trying to keep the structure intact. The question is, did you examine a tear down and how much it would cost to build it in a different configuration that may be more or less, you know, in needing of so many variances, as be it to parking or location of the parking, or even just square footage? Was that ever explored so we could have an idea of, well, it would cost to tear it down and build back up is an extra $250,000, and you really couldn't put a large enough spot on here to make it work anyway? Did you look into any of those alternatives?
We did not, because we actually believe that the existing building has some phenomenal bones that can be accentuated and complemented in a very favorable way. I like some of the industrial provenance of the structure. I think there's a way to architecturally treat that actually makes it actually even a more attractive structure than it would be if I tried to do this from the ground up. I actually think it's a beautiful building. It's just been neglected, and no one's ever capitalized on the opportunity that's here. It's, you know, it's a phenomenal canvas. It just required a little tender loving care and some thoughtful design work.
So in other words, the building's pretty much intact. So there's, you know, you'd be tearing down a perfectly good building just to build up something that was maybe more in conformity.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. And I said, I do respond to buildings like this. So I love, as I said, the industrial provenance of it. And I think it's architecturally actually intriguing and appealing. But yes, it is in perfectly good condition. The building is structurally sound, and we're going to capitalize on that. Our desire is to capitalize on that. Norma, how am I doing?
All right.
Mr. McDevitt, it's John Riley.
Yes, sir.
I know Mr. Tavani will probably get more into this during his testimony, but how many employees does the prospective tenant have? And presumably they'll all be moving into this facility, assuming it's renovated.
George, I think I've referenced this before with you in conversation. This is from memory, so forgive me. I believe she has 28 employees, 19 of which currently drive to work. The others come mass transportation, bicycle, and by other means.
Okay, thank you.
Somewhere was 28 to 30, I recall correctly.
And you said, Wade, they're already in the district?
They're in the district, have been in the district for, I believe, over 20 years. And it's a wonderful, organization, company, and I think a nice compliment to the town. And we want to keep them here.
Can I ask a quick question? It's Jamie.
Yes.
Is there an expectation of visitors coming back and forth to the office during those business hours? And if so, is there a heavy traffic at certain times?
No, I mean, she will have this, their company will have people visit, obviously, but it's not a business that you would see as a high demand. It's not like a brokerage office that people are coming in to meet with their agents. It's not like that. It's an elevated printing business.
Yeah.
They do high-end stationery, invitations, and printing. Extraordinarily, respected, but it's graphic work. So there are customers that will come in, newly brides to be who want to see the invitation up close and in person. So I'm sure we'll see some of that, but otherwise we don't see this as a high demand,
Excellent. Thank you.
a high visitor demand tendency.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, are there other questions from the board for Mr. McDevitt?
No.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. George, please continue.
Thank you. I'd like to call Rob Lambert. You there, Rob?
I'm here.
Oh, I need his picture so I can swear him in.
Hello?
I see his picture.
Oh, I don't.
Rob, could you take down the exhibits maybe for a minute? Maybe that'll go to a bigger screen.
George, I do think you need to stop sharing in order for him to
Yep,
appear.
there we go.
Okay, Mr. Lambert, if you'll raise your right hand. You do solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Thank you. State your full name for the record, please.
Rob Lambert.
Thank you.
All right, are we back?
Mr. Riley, you're on mute. I think you were saying something.
No, I was just nodding, saying, please proceed.
Oh, okay, thank you. Rob, can you go to exhibit A10?
Yes.
Just for the record, is this a copy of a summary of your professional experience?
Yeah, this is my CV, yes. I have educational background on the first page, and then their following pages are representative projects I've done throughout the years.
Okay, I don't see that on my screen. I see the plan, but I don't know if the board really wants to see that. I was going to ask, are you?
Wait, let me, maybe I shared the wrong screen. Give me a second here, I apologize. There we go. There we go. Is that better?
Yes. So that's what we were just speaking about, a summary of some of your professional experience.
Yes, so the educational experience at the top of the page. I have a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from the University of Notre Dame and a Master's of Science in Civil Engineering from Villanova University.
And are you licensed engineer in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania?
I am.
I'd like to offer Rob as an expert in civil engineering and land development matters.
Without objection.
Thank you. Rob, are you generally familiar with the property in the area?
I'm very familiar with the property in the area.
And we had submitted a revised plan set that I spoke of earlier that removed references to a previously proposed second floor at A11. Is this the current plan set?
Yes, this is the current plan set of A11. It consists of 3 sheets, cover sheet, existing conditions, and a proposed plan.
And drawing your attention to sheet 2 of A11, does that show the existing conditions on the property?
Yes, it does.
And could you briefly describe the existing conditions?
Yes, across the top of the page going left to right is West Wayne Avenue. On the right-hand side, going from lower left to upper right, is South Wayne. To the right of the brown shaded area, so the building is the brown shaded area. The gray area is the existing pavement between the building and South Wayne Avenue, and the tan color are various walkways and on the property. To the right, so closer to the point of South Wayne and West Wayne, is the post office. To the left is the library, and almost directly across South Wayne Avenue from our frontage is the firehouse.
And could you turn to Exhibit A11, Sheet 3, the proposed conditions plan?
Yes, this is A11 Sheet 3.
And can you review this, please?
Yep. So this is the plan is in the same orientation. The brown is the building area. So everything that you see in brown really exists today. There's the looking from the sky, right? So this is all roof area that exists. And then you have the parking area, which is the gray. And then the green is just showing landscape area. So you can see Mr. McDevitt talked about the area that was adjacent to the building on the right side, or the South Wayne Avenue side of the building, where we're removing some of the hardscaping to install landscaping along there. And then we've also restriped the existing asphalt area to gain 8 parking spaces on the north side. So toward the post office, on the post office side, that was formerly used for vehicles maneuvering to use the loading dock in and out. But now that there won't be the big loading dock area, we can stripe that for parking. So we were able to add 8 parking spaces to the site, while also including our own loading space for normal business deliveries.
Will there be a physical separation between the subject parcel and the post office parcel at those new parking spaces?
We haven't gotten to that level of detail, but there may be some separation.
Rob, I think you commented on impervious coverage. This will remain in compliance and actually reduce slightly. Is that correct?
Yes, we have a slight reduction in the impervious coverage.
I'd like to go over the existing and proposed parking calculations. We're a little out of order because we set the package up earlier in the day, but if you could skip down to A16, is this a parking chart that we have prepared?
Yes, it is. Let me get to A16.
And if you could pull that up, if you could walk us through that, please.
Yep. So we've created a little table here trying to sort out all the various parking standards. So on the left-hand side is the use, right? So each row represents what the use was. So when it was the current building, the existing industrial use was 8,750 gross square feet. The township code permits a 80% calculation when they're doing the parking, and then they also have employees. So we put the 80% of the 8,750, which is 7,000, and then we have 54 employees that were part of the mail sorting facility. The next column is the code requirement, which yielded 62 required parking spaces. The ITE column we'll talk about when we get to the next row, and then the spaces provided on site. So as a mail sorting facility, we talked about the truck being able to turn around. There were 6 parking spaces on the south property line, and so there were 6. So the kind of the non-conformity or public parking used were 56 parking spaces were used off-site under the code. The next row, which is actually crossed out on this exhibit, showed the analysis based on the 2-story office building. So again, going through the same columns, it showed that 61 parking spaces were required. Mr. Giovanni will get into some of his testimony, but under the traffic engineer's report, it shows that 42 parking spaces would be used on a normal basis based on the manual, where there were 14 parking spaces on site. We were still reducing the nonconformity, but there were 47 spaces that would be either off-site or be the nonconformity. So we were going from 56 to 47. After the feedback, Mr. McDevitt talked about the second story was no longer proposed, and it was going to be just a proposed one-story office building, so reusing the existing office building. We have a slightly different gross square footage, came down to 8,000 square feet gross. And for office, it's one space per 250 square feet is the code requirement, which would yield 33 parking spaces required. Again, the ITE number, which Mr. Tavani will explain, says that really 24 parking spaces would typically be required for a building of this size. We have 14 parking spaces that are proposed on site. And so our nonconformity actually drops to 19 from the 56. So we have 56 today, 19 space nonconformity in the future.
Thank you. Turning to the section 280-5312B, which was the thing I mentioned in my opening remarks about the location of parking. Are you familiar with this provision, what it requires, that parking not be between the building, the front of the building and the street?
Yes.
And do you believe you could interpret the provision as we have discussed, that it has two fronts and this is the functional rear for the existing building?
Correct. So using A11 sheet 3, and so we have the frontage on West Wayne Avenue, which could be the front. That actually comes in, the doors on the side there, Mr. McDevitt mentioned that we're looking at that for ADA access, actually comes in at grade. So it comes in right at the main floor elevation. So if that were the front of the building, we'd have the rear of the building really faces South Wayne Avenue. And there's the existing parking spaces that are between the building and South Wayne Avenue. So this really functions as the rear, although the code says not between the building and the street. Again, we're not increasing any nonconformity here, that we have those 6 parking spaces that are non-conforming, and if you looked at the code that way, and the 8 are really just mirror imaging those existing spaces.
And as a practical matter, this is the only place you can see from the plan to stripe more parking on the property, correct?
Correct.
In your general experience and opinion, will this plan cause any detrimental impacts to adjoining properties or the general public health, safety, and welfare?
No, it will not. I actually think it will enhance the area by reusing the existing building, the existing structure, and breathing new life into the building.
That's all I have for Mr. Lambert at this time.
George?
Thank you. Do any members of the board have questions for Mr. Lambert?
None.
George?
No.
No. Mr. McDevitt, did you want to speak? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I checked my notes while Rob was presenting, and the prospective tenant has 26 employees, 15 of which come by automobile. The balance of the employees, she said, mostly come by train.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're
Okay, there are no questions for Mr. Lambert. Mr. Brosman, please continue.
Yeah, my next witness is Frank Tavani, and then just so the board knows, I want to come back to Mr. McDevitt after we finish with Mr. Tavani, if that's okay.
Sure.
Frank, this is Exhibit A12.
George, Frank needs
yeah.
to be sworn. Frank needs to be sworn also. Norman needs to be able to see him.
Rob, could you unshare again and so Norma can see Frank?
You do solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
Yes, I do.
State your full name for me, please.
Frank Tavani, Tavani.
Thank you.
Frank at Exhibit A12, and you don't have to go into detail. Just for the record, is this a summary of your professional qualifications?
Yes,
And is your area of specialty transportation engineering?
yes,
And you're a licensed engineer in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania?
yes. I have been continuously licensed since 1999.
And I would offer Frank as an expert in transportation engineering.
Without objection. Thank you.
Thank you. Frank, are you also familiar with the property in the general area?
Yes,
And are you familiar with the proposed plans?
I am.
And have you considered the parking needs of the proposed use and the availability of parking in the area?
I have on no less than 2 separate occasions, in fact.
And at A13, is this a copy of a report that you wrote?
Yes,
And could you describe to the board, what you did in making this report and what your conclusions are, please?
sure. A13 is a 16-page exhibit. The first 2 pages are my most recent efforts, which were conducted in September of this year, followed by a reduced version of Mr. Lambert's site plan. And then all the remaining pages of the exhibit are the first parking investigation report that I prepared, which was dated March 13th. Some of you on the board may remember that date. That was a Friday, and that was probably the last normal Friday prior to COVID. That week, I personally conducted a parking survey, a very thorough parking survey in a approximate 1/2 mile radius of the subject property, and did that to assess both existing parking supply in the study area, whether it be at a nominal cost or free parking, as well as parking demand at various times of the day. And the reason why there are 2 reports, as you heard at the outset of tonight's proceedings, is because originally the study included a site having 2 stories and more square footage. And as you can see on page 1 of A13 is now considerably smaller, which means both the expected trip generation and parking generation are also considerably smaller. In no particular order, since we are looking at page 1 of A13, you will see there are 2 tables. The first table is entitled Trip Generation, and the last row is the ITE, or Institute of Transportation Engineers, estimate of trip generation or traffic activity for the site based on the 10,000 approximate square footage. And just very quickly, you'll see that there's 12 total trips in either the AM or the PM peak hour, with more traffic coming in the morning, 10, and then out in the afternoon. Now, this is strictly published book rates, if you will, from the ITE based on this square footage. This is totally independent of specific users and specific employee counts, for example. However, based on the testimony that we heard earlier today, it's very interesting that with 26 employees, approximately, about 11 of whom either rely on walking, biking, or using mass transit, that leaves 15 who may potentially drive. That number marries quite well with the ITE estimate of 10, especially when one considers that these are peak hour numbers. There's certainly still some activity inbound or outbound in the 60 minutes or 120 minutes, what have you, both preceding and following each peak hour. In other words, not everybody arrives in one 60-minute window. Some will come a little bit later and probably leave later at the end of the day, and vice versa. So it's always comforting to see that the ITE empirical information actually matches up with the specific tenant in mind. Of course, trip generation is not the important issue tonight. The issue tonight is about parking. And as you heard earlier from Mr. Lambert, ITE also makes available a publication, not creatively, entitled Parking Generation, where they offer an opinion about the average peak parking demand for various land use categories, in this case, office. And for a office building, generally speaking, the average peak parking demand is about 2.4 spaces per 1,000 square feet. And with 10,000 square feet, we have a predicted peak demand of 24, as shown in the last row on the second table of page 1 of A13. With 14 parking spaces provided on site, this means that the site may rely on 10 on-street parking spaces. That does not take into account any of the users that might rely on transit or walking or biking in a general sense. It's a peak number. I found that within a half-mile radius of the site, which represents about a 10-minute walk for the average person, on any given time during that week in March when I made my observations, there were at least 18 free parking spaces within a half-mile radius of the site. And there were over 100 more parking spaces, most of which were metered parking spaces, also within a half-mile radius of the site. So with well over 100 parking spaces to rely upon and only possibly 10 needed, according to ITE, I do not believe that the proposal will represent a parking problem for Wayne.
Mr. Tavani, a quick question on that. With respect to the free spots that you identified being within a very reasonable walk of the location, how many of those spots were in what would be more fairly described as residential as opposed to commercial areas? I mean, one of the beauties of Wayne is it's very easy to walk to from where you live. So were most or a large portion of those free spots available in residential areas?
I think that's a fair statement. Specifically, they were along Runnymede Avenue, as well as Bloomingdale Avenue. Runnymede being west of the site, about 2 blocks or so. And as I recall, there was a mix of apartments and single-family homes in that area. And I will point out that since I had well over 100 empty parking spaces each time I went to the site. Can you go back one page, actually? One more. And one more, we'll do it. This table at the bottom, this is my earlier report from March of this year. I broke up the parking into 6 different zones. Zones 3 and 6 were the surveyed spaces that were free, 3 being Runnymede and 6 being Bloomingdale. Runnymede actually had free parking on both sides of the street, and I only surveyed the available free parking on the east side of Runnymede, closest to the site. And I did that largely because there was just so much empty parking. I didn't feel it was necessary to survey parking on the west side of the street as well, although I do clearly remember there also being even more empty spaces there at all of these times. You can see that the surveys were conducted on Wednesday and Thursday. Again, this is pre-COVID, at 12, 1 in the afternoon, as well as in the late morning hours.
Thank you. And one other question, and I know that we're going back to trip generation, which is probably not the central focus here, but is an important issue in our determining whether the relief, if granted, causes any problems in the surrounding area. The AM peak hour that is identified, is that between 8 and 9 AM, or is it a specific time, and how does that relate to, say, traffic that the middle school is generating?
So it is really not a specific hour. However, it is some 60-minute period, generally within a defined 2-hour window, typically being between 7 and 9 a.m. So it could be 7:15 to 8:15. It could be 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. But it's a 60-minute time period within that time window. So there could be some overlap. with school activity. I did not include the parking lots that are reserved for the school. But obviously there could be some parking demand, however long or brief, associated with various street segments related to the schools.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
And Frank, was school in session when you made your counts?
Yes, again, this was mainly coincidental and fortunate. School was in normal session, and I did confirm this on both the days that I was there. I believe that Thursday was the last day of normal school. I should also point out that I didn't take any credit or attempt to estimate the trip generation activity associated with the prior use as a USPS sorting facility. As you might imagine, that is not a land use category contained in ITE resources. However, I would hazard a guess that at some point in its history, this site generated considerably more traffic than what the applicant is proposing.
Is it my understanding, Frank, that you didn't take other, what I would call customary credits that could be taken regarding the nature of the area, the walkability of Wayne, and the proximity to mass transit?
That is correct. I did not take any such credits, further bolstering the conservative approach of my efforts.
So I think it's clear from your testimony, but for the record, in your professional opinion, will the proposed office use, as we have described it, in your opinion, cause any detrimental impact to the immediate area or the general public health, safety, and welfare?
Not with regard to trip generation or parking generation, no.
That's all I have for Mr. Tavani at this time.
Okay, thank you. Questions from members of the board? Okay, I'll take that as a no. Thank you, Mr. Tavani. Mr. Brosman, please proceed.
Thank you. As I had mentioned, I wanted to go back to Mr. McDevitt briefly, I hope. Wade, you talked, and you're still under oath, you talked earlier about your belief that there wouldn't be a parking issue caused, so I won't go back over that. But now that we've had the benefit of Mr. Tavani's testimony, I also wanted to circle back with you. Notwithstanding what we've said about the parking, are we offering as a condition of approval, if the board would be so inclined to approve the project, are you agreeable to purchasing some supplemental parking passes?
We are.
And Rob, if you could go to A14. I think it's A14. We use this slide in some of our other presentations. This is something from the Township website about a smart card program that the Township has. And is it this program, Mr. McDevitt, that you're willing to have the tenant purchase a certain number of annual passes from the Township?
It is.
And not to be presumptuous, but for convenience of the board, I drafted some language that you'll find at Exhibit A15. If the board was inclined, to have a belt and suspenders approach with regard to parking, we feel that the property will be like many others in downtown Wayne, and it will be fine with regard to parking, especially with the reduction. We proposed this language for the board's consideration. It's at A15. It basically says, for so long as the property is devoted to office use and remains non-conforming to the applicable code parking requirements, the right to use at least 10 off-site parking spaces will be secured. Initially, these spaces will be secured by purchasing 10 annual smart card parking passes from Radnor Township. Thereafter, this condition may be satisfied by other means, including smart cards, lease of parking spaces from Radnor Township or from the owners of other properties within 2,640 feet of the property with excess parking, subject to confirmation of such excess by the township zoning officer or a combination thereof. As I mentioned, we felt that there would be no parking problem given the nature of the use and given Mr. Tavani's study. But we looked at this program that the township already has in Wayne. And you heard Mr. Tavani indicate that under ITE, there would be possibly a 24 parking space demand to be expected. We're able to restripe to get to 14 spaces, which leaves a 10 space difference. So that is why we came to the number 10. And that's just for the board's consideration. Should the board be interested in something like that, my client is willing to agree to that. That is our presentation in chief, and I would ask that my exhibits be entered into the record.
Without objection. Kevin, I have not seen any emails come in for public comment. Are you aware of any that have come in for public comment on this?
Correct, Mr. Chairman. I just checked and I have not received any either.
Okay, thank you. There being no public comment at this time, I would ask, well,
John,
before we
can I
get to, yeah, go ahead, Jenny.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Forgive me, it's Jamie Foreman. What are the operating hours on Saturdays? I know you said this is a pre-existing and successful business that may be doing printing with the public and wedding invitations. So you would expect there might be visitors on Saturdays, I would suspect, but could you confirm the hours on Saturdays?
I do not believe they have Saturday hours. Not to say they do not occasionally have a client meeting with under special circumstances, but I do not believe they have established Saturday hours.
Okay, so you pretty much confirmed that the weekends are closed.
Correct.
Excellent, thank you.
As I said, they may have a one-off meeting where they meet with a client who can only meet them on Saturday, and that would be a team of 2 or 3 people. I would anticipate meeting with 1 or 2 people.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Thanks. Mr. Brosman, I just want to, so that the board's deliberation is focused on I guess your best arguments at this point. With respect to the use, you've applied alternatively under the special exception provision and under the variance provision. Which one is your best argument? Special exception or variance? And why?
Well, I always like a special exception as opposed to a variance, as you might imagine. So I'll touch on that first. The building was used, by the post office, but it was of an industrial nature. It was a postal sorting facility, and it is on a separate lot. So it wasn't really an accessory use technically to the post office. It's a standalone lot with a standalone building, although it has an attachment that's blocked off. So, when the post office moved out and the building has stood vacant for all these years, I know the board does have a provision in the non-conforming use provisions where even a different occupant of the same nature has to come before the board. But I do believe there would be support for some other similar, industrial type use could have possibly moved in here. The post office isn't the only operation that has to sort mail and packages these days. We know about UPS and Federal Express and Amazon. So I do believe there's a good argument that it is a non-conforming use, and converting it to office, I think, is a less intense use. And with regard to the variance, I went back and forth in my mind. Is it a use variance? Is it a dimensional variance? think it's more like a dimensional variance. It's office is permitted in the zone. It's permitted, but it's supposed to be on a second floor, which we don't have. But there's a long line of cases, whether they're either dimensional and even use variance cases where the building itself, the physical configuration of the building itself can be the hardship. And the uses permitted here are so few. And given the location within the Wayne Business District, I think Mr. McDevitt did a good job of pointing out that this is really not the location for retail, even in good times, even before retail was under great pressure, which has only been exacerbated. So I think our special exception case is good, but I think there would be grounds for a variance as well under the line of cases that look at an existing building, an existing, location also of the building. So that's the use question.
Okay, and then with respect to each of the parking questions, I know you've covered it in the testimony and the discussion, but you can just sum up for the board your position on the wisdom of the variance with respect to the two parking requirements.
Sure. And again, we have alternate relief here. There is some prior zoning board decisions. I know they're not necessarily precedent. Every property is different. But I think the law also supports the idea that, a nonconformity can be continued. And what we have here is a parking nonconformity, a building, this large industrial type building that was built that at one time had 54 employees when it was the postal sorting facility, and it just didn't have much parking like many properties in a village in a downtown area, and Wayne and many other places, of course. So the board recognized, in some cases recognized, that a non-conforming condition like that can be continued, and I think our parking chart and the calculations on the plan show that by changing the use, we're actually reducing the degree of parking nonconformity, and we can stripe 8 more spaces on an already paved area. That area had to be used for truck maneuvering when the big trucks were coming in and out of the loading dock. So by 2 ways, we're reducing the parking nonconformity by adding more to our site and by changing the use to a less intensive use. So I think under the doctrine that a nonconformity could be continued, the board could approve that without variance, or or could alternatively approve a variance. Again, the building is here. We've shown you the site plan. We've put parking everywhere where we can fit it. The building is an existing valuable building. It stood vacant for a long time, and we've actually we've minimized the variance by eliminating the second floor. So I think there's strong grounds, either theory for the number of parking, and then for that more technical issue, the location of the parking. As Mr. Lambert said, there's already been parking there. It's the only place to add any more striped parking. So that it's either an existing nonconformity, or I think a variance could be granted because that's the only place to add more parking. So I think that sums up our positions. Thank you for giving me that opportunity.
Sure. Any further questions from members of the board?
Mr. Chair, assuming there's no questions from the board, Mr. Chair, I just have a brief point to raise with Mr. Brosman, if I may.
Sure.
Ms. George, with respect to the nonconformity and the special exception, if the board grants it, would obviously, I think, would be with proviso that it's obviously a non-conforming because it's going to be on the first floor in this district. So obviously, if down the road there's any plans to put a second floor on, that would obviously require a different application. So it would be with that understanding, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make that clear.
That's clear.
Okay, we're at the point now where if a member of the board would like to make a motion as in whatever form he or she wishes to make, usually in the affirmative, we can get conversation started.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion. It's Brad DeLizio here, Norma. I proposing to grant the special exception under code 280-101A1 and A2 to change use of the building from a non-conforming industrial use to an office use, as well as to grant a variance under code 280-53-12B2, both a variance as to the location of the parking spaces to be provided, as well as the number of parking spaces required for the office use, in accordance with the plans and specifications put forth in the record.
Is there a second for that motion? Jamie Foreman indicates. Okay. The motion has been moved and seconded. I would ask Mr. DeLizio whether he would revise that motion to take advantage of the offer from the applicant with respect to the special arrangements around parking that were described by Mr. Brosman, either the parking cards or future efforts to mitigate the parking shortage.
Yeah.
Is that something that you'd consider including in? Okay.
As long as our esteemed counsel can write it, yes.
I would ask if he could consider another amendment.
Oh boy.
That for purposes of the use, the change in use, I don't believe special exception provisions apply here because it's a brand new non-conforming use. It's not a continuation because of the vacancy. So I would ask that we grant the application based on a variance from the requirement of use.
I'm fine with either one. Yep. So if variance works for everyone, I'll amend it for the variance as opposed to a special exception.
Okay. And do we need to second the as modified motion? Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, please. Board discussion on this. Anybody want to jump in, or do we want to move forward?
I'll just make one piece. I think the only issue for me that I was really thinking hard about was the lack of parking spaces. But though I know we don't need to follow precedent. I know on at least two occasions we've heard a similar case from restaurants in Wayne where they had parking like literally just behind the restaurant, 2 spaces, and that was the logic to say, well, you have one property parking, whereas you have a ton of meter parking, and I think at least my logic then is, I think in Wayne, especially with the amount of metered parking that we have both on the street and in lots, that is kind of, I think, how you should be filling the need for parking in these, especially, and I'm really more talking in the Wayne, North Wayne, South Wayne area, just in those areas. But that was really my only issue. I think it's fantastic that this building is going to get a use and also get cleaned up. And also great to see that there'll be first and foremost, the tenant will be staying in Wayne, but more importantly, I think this is going to look beautiful next to the library.
Yeah, I was a big fan of special exception until George reminded us that George Nagel reminded us. George Brosman did not remind us, but perhaps the issue of abandonment there was out there. I'm not sure. I don't recall, frankly, how long the post office has not been using that facility as a sorting facility, but certainly one could make the point that the prior non-conforming use had been abandoned, and this is in fact a new non-conforming use. But in either alternative, I mean, if it would be a harder case here if the office use was completely prohibited in the WBOD. It's not. It just says it has to be on second and higher floors. I too love the idea of this property coming back to life. And I think it had the applicant has made its showing that a variance is appropriate in this case. And parking, I appreciate the applicant's willingness to go above and beyond in terms of securing additional parking, because my one concern was that, you know, one of the benefits of Wayne can also be, in some instances, one of the disadvantages. It's very walkable. And if people were just parking in residential spaces, in more residential areas because there's no meter there, and making a 5-minute or 6-minute walk back to the office, you know, I might have some misgivings about that, but you know, I appreciate the applicant's willingness to step up to mitigate to mitigate that parking shortage, and to you know, really do a you know, work together, so to speak, with everyone to come up with a development that makes sense. George, Jamie?
I don't have anything further. I would add, I agree with everything you just said, John. And any other comments? Did we get public comment?
We asked for it. There was no email public comment, and there was no one else on the Zoom to public comment at the appointed time.
Okay.
All right. There being no other discussion, we'll call the vote. Mr. Nagel, are you in favor or against?
I'm in favor.
Ms. Foreman?
In favor.
Mr. Delizia?
In favor.
And I'm also in favor, so the relief is granted by a vote of 4-0. Mr. McDevitt, good luck with your project. We're looking forward to seeing it.
Thank you very much. For
All
sure.
right. Mr. Brosman, thank you.
Thank you. Good night to everyone.
Good night.
Okay, moving on. Appeal 3078, the applicant Joseph B. Marone, Jr., property located at 407 South Hythen Avenue and zoned R1 residential. The applicant seeks zoning relief in the form of a de minimis variance or a dimensional variance as to section 280-15F of the ordinance. The maximum impervious surface is permitted in the R1 zoning district. The relief sought is to allow 22.9% of impervious coverage surfaces, where section 280-15F permits the maximum impervious surfaces of 22%. Is the applicant ready to proceed?
Yes, we are. Members of the board, John Kiefel here for the applicant, Joseph B. Marone, Jr. I have with me in my office, Jay Ferguson, who is the proposed builder of the project, and then also remote, as you can see, is Joseph Marone. And what we plan to do is have questioning here for Mr. Ferguson first, and then several items after Mr. Ferguson's done, and do the questioning, several questions directed as to Mr. Marone, but the bulk of the testimony coming from Mr. Ferguson, the proposed builder. Just very basically, what the project. I'm sorry.
Would you do me a favor? Get closer to the microphone and stay there and don't move around.
Gotcha. Okay. Is that a little better?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry about that. Working with the technology. To just briefly describe the project, there are 3 areas that are existing, and we had submitted our exhibit pack, so I don't know if we'd be able to pull that up so you can see the site plan sheet. But there we go. And if we could go to sheet 14, which is exhibit A1, there's the property. And what is being proposed is that there is an area of an existing stone parking lot that's to be demolished and removed and replaced with pervious coverage. There's an existing asphalt driveway which will be demolished, removed, and replaced with pervious coverage. And there's also existing stone patios that will be demolished, removed, and restored to pervious coverage And then there's an addition to the residence that's 2,034.7 square feet that will be added to the existing single-family dwelling. And there are multiple nonconformities concerning this particular property, but the one that we need relief from is that there is existing impervious coverage on the property of 25.4%, and we're reducing that down to 22.9%, which is really a shade, not even a whole percentage point off of what the requirement of the ordinance is. And as you can see, the property has some unique features. It's a fish hook shaped lot. It is also a very mature lot with lots of wooded area and trees that restricts really the areas that you're able to build, as well as existing tennis court which was installed in 1945, a detached garage, which was also installed in 1945, and a swimming pool, which the county data identifies as being installed in February of 1974, but it appears that the pool was there for a longer period of time than before that. All of that impervious coverage existed way before the original ordinance date of February 25 of 1974. So against that backdrop, I'd like to have Mr. Ferguson sworn in, and we'll start his testimony.
Mr. Ferguson, if you'll raise your right hand, I'll swear you in. You do solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
I do.
Okay. State your full name, please.
Hey.
J. Ferguson.
And spell J, J-A-Y.
J-A-Y.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Ferguson, could you give the board a little bit of an idea about your professional background?
Well, I went to Radnor High School. I graduated from there and went on after college to get into the building industry. I built my first house in 1980 in Philadelphia County. Subsequently, I worked for a company out of Radnor Township, Real Homes, and supervised construction at the Hermitage project in Lower Merion. Over the years, I've built many homes, probably seen 40 of them built altogether, and currently I'm building a house in Lower Merion, down along the Schuylkill River in Gladwin. And I have built a house in Drozen when I acted as project manager, and I've done a number of those and hotels. So I have quite a varied background in construction.
So at this point, I'd like to move for the admission of Mr. Ferguson as an expert in the area of home construction.
Without objection.
Okay, if we could get sheet number 24, which is Exhibit A4, pulled up. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Ferguson, we have up in front of us exhibit, it's been marked as Exhibit A4. Is that the deed for the property?
Yes.
And is Joseph B. Marone, the applicant, the owner of the property per A4?
Yes, he is.
And could you tell us the zoning district for this particular property?
R1.
Okay. And if we could put sheet 14 back up again, which is the site plan, A1. Thank you. And Mr. Ferguson, you're familiar with both the project at 407 Ithan Avenue, as well as this site plan that's been marked as A1?
Yes, I am.
And what is your proposed role on this particular project?
To be the builder to execute the changes to the drawing as well as the construction of the new addition if approved.
Okay, if we could go to the next sheet, which is sheet 15, which is the magnified version of the property. So, Mr. Ferguson, could you describe the areas that are proposed to be demolished on the property?
There is a large area of existing asphalt driveway that leads down along the end of the tennis court toward a garage. That is meant to be removed, and that area there would then have a approved system from the township so that it could have grass put back in, that it could occasionally be driven over, but not to be used for, active use on a regular basis.
And there's also a stone parking lot area to be demolished as well.
Yes, and that would have the same thing done to it as well.
And there's also some existing stone patios to be demolished. Is that also correct?
Yes, they would meant to be removed, and because of the depth of the sub base, etc., all that would be removed, and they would have new earth placed in there and wind up getting new grass.
And could you describe the proposed addition to the existing residence?
The addition is meant to have a new breezeway to attach to the older home and to basically create additional living space and storage space for the existing home.
Okay, if we could go to the next sheet, sheet 16. Okay, and could you tell us, sheet 16 is a blow up of the plan A1, but there is, my apologies, I'm trying to get my version of this enlarged here for Mr. Ferguson. The existing impervious coverage, could you describe to the board what those existing items are noted on A1?
Yep. So
Counsel, before the witness answers that question, the witness did not prepare this plan, correct?
That's correct. It is from Shrewman Surveying of Kimberton, Pennsylvania. Is that correct, Mr. Ferguson?
Yes, that is correct.
And they are a licensed surveyor in the
Yes,
Commonwealth of Pennsylvania?
They certainly are.
I know the plan does not bear a seal, is that correct?
I believe that there was a sealed copy that was delivered to the township by Mr. Marone, and I can ask him a follow-up question in that regard when I have him on. But I believe there was at least one stamped copy that was delivered.
Yeah, mine is sealed, Mr. Chairman, so.
Oh, it is? Okay, mine is not. Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure, and Mr. Ferguson, the existing impervious coverage areas, could you tell the board about those items?
Yeah, so right now the existing is the building takes up 2,853.6 square feet. The driveway takes up 11,016.4 square feet. The existing garage is 957.9 square feet. The pool house is 365 square feet. The swimming pool is 1,589.6 square feet. The tennis court is 7,298.8 square feet. The patio is 1,203.3 square feet. There's a brick walk of 681.6 square feet, and there's a miscellaneous walls and pads that add up to 327.4 square feet for a total of 26,293.6 square feet.
Okay, and as to the impervious coverage proposed, that's to be reduced from the existing, is that correct?
That is correct.
And we noted at the beginning of your testimony the items that are to be taken out. What's the proposed total impervious coverage now?
The new one for the proposed would be 23,635.4 square feet.
And the percentage of that would be?
22.9.
Okay. If we could go to sheet 26, which is the county data. Okay, Mr. Ferguson, you're familiar with Exhibit 6, which is the county data. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell us when the single-family residence at the property was built?
Let's see. I believe that was 1880. Yeah, 1885.
Okay, and if you could make sure that you keep your voice up on the.
Sorry about that, 1885.
Okay, and is the single-family detached dwelling is a permitted use in the R1 district? Is that correct?
Yes.
And when was the tennis court built at the property?
I believe that was 1945.
Okay, and the tennis court is also permitted accessory use or accessory building structure in the R1 district. Is that correct?
Yes, and I believe it was permitted.
Okay, and when was the detached garage built at the property?
That was also built in 1945.
And is the garage also permitted accessory use in an accessory building and structure in the R1 zoning district?
Yes, it is.
And when was the swimming pool built at the property?
They specified 1974, but I believe it's a concrete pool, which would tell me that it's older than that, but I would have to do some real investigation to, narrow that down to a date. But 1974 is what I have.
Okay, and the swimming pool is also a permitted accessory use and accessory building and structure in the R1 zoning district?
Yes.
Okay, if we could go to sheet number 18, which is Exhibit A3. And Mr. Ferguson, you're familiar with Exhibit A3?
Yes, I am.
Which is an aerial view of the property?
Yep.
And that's a true, correct representation of the current conditions at the property?
Yes, it is.
And that's a Google Map snapshot. Is that also correct?
Yes.
Okay. And okay, Mr. Ferguson, are there some unusual features or some items concerning the property that are noteworthy? I guess is the best way to ask that.
Well, it has a lot of natural shielding, bushes, trees, foliage around a lot of the perimeter of the property. There's some behind the home, behind the garage, along the borders with the neighbors. A lot of nice trees, a lot of nice greenery.
And at this point, the trees and the greenery are to be preserved by this particular plan. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And if we could go to the next sheet, so we can show the borders of the property. Very quickly, Mr. Ferguson, the next photo, is this a true and correct representation of the conditions at the border of the property?
Yes.
Okay, if we could go to the next sheet.
Council, I apologize for interrupting your rhythm. It's Brad DeLizzie here. I just want to
Okay,
make
no
sure,
problem.
because you just showed a picture that kind of raised something that I just want to make sure is accurately reflected in the plans.
Sure.
Under the impervious coverage, because I know you got building, driveway, garage, pool house, swimming pool, tennis court is great detail, but I don't see anything for the hot tub. I don't see anything for the shed that's behind the pool. I don't see anything for the solar panels, nor do I see anything for the pool equipment in terms of impervious, because clearly they are. And that will play into the discussion of is I think you're going to argue that this is de minimis. But to me, I don't know. Those are certainly not buildings, right? But they're certainly could be considered structures. But to me, it doesn't feel like it's actually covered in the impervious calculation.
Okay, hold on. Let me back out. Let me back out the picture here.
Because again, anything like a hot tub or a shed would clearly need a permit, and also would, and I'm surprised even with the solar panel or something like that. Obviously, you need to pull a permit for that, and that would increase the impervious coverage. So, surprised you got a permit for that.
And unfortunately, we don't have the person that prepared the plan and did the calculations to walk us through how the calculations were carried out. Unless you have someone from Schumann Surveying available to testify.
No, I do not have anybody from Schumann Surveying available. And I guess my question is, since I have Mr. Marone on, if that's necessary, and I believe based on the questioning that that's necessary, I would like to make somebody available and continue so that I could answer or specifically have an answer for that question, as opposed to just passing on it and not addressing it right now.
Right. I mean, because for instance, there's there's a line item, miscellaneous walls and pads. It could well be that that's included in that calculation or not, but we don't know, and we don't have anyone in front of us who prepared the plan or did the calculations.
Right, and I would not want the board to guess on that either. And with Mr. Marone on the line, Mr. Marone, is that acceptable to you to have somebody from Shrewsbury available?
It is, John, but if you look at that breakdown of impervious surface, all of the miscellaneous stuff that was just mentioned is in that miscellaneous bucket. I understand I didn't prepare the survey, but I had discussions with the surveyor, and it is sensible that it's in that bucket.
Okay, well then let's do that. If you want to go ahead and proceed, then we'll make sure we have you sworn, and we'll let you go ahead and testify as to that point, if that's and with the board's indulgence.
Sure.
If I could see him so I can swear him in.
Okay, so if you could drop down the exhibit, thank you.
Mr. Marone, you'll raise your right hand. You do solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do, ma'am.
State your full name, please, and spell your last.
Joseph B. Marone, Jr. Marone spelled M-A-R-R-O-N-E.
And your middle initial again was?
B as in Bernard.
Thank you.
So, Joe, as to the question that was posed, can you give us or talk to specifically about the interactions with the surveyor and the calculations to respond to the question from the board?
Sure. The surveyor came to my property on multiple occasions and performed surveying acts. And if you look at that breakdown of the items, which I don't have in front of me, I believe the last one is the miscellaneous bucket, which encompasses the hot tub, the shed.
16.
You can see a little flagstone walkway there. All of that is in that miscellaneous walls and pads, which would make sense.
And so specific, who did you have interaction with the survey company? What was the name of the individual?
I believe his name was Richard.
That's Richard Shaw.
The professional surveyor.
Okay, thank you.
Please continue.
Okay, so I'm gonna jump back to Mr. Ferguson and finish that colloquy, and then I'll move back over to Mr. Marone. We were looking at the aerial view, and we were talking about the items that were in essence the unusual shapes or unusual configurations, and we were going through the surrounding property items. So if we can go to the next sheet, which I believe was sheet 20, was where we were headed to next. Is that a true and correct depiction of the property conditions looking out towards the border of the property under number 2, picture number 2?
Yes, it is.
If we can go to the next sheet, is that also, as to that picture number 3, also depict true and correct the surrounding conditions at the property?
Yep, that is as well.
If we could go to the next sheet, sheet 4, does that also depict truly and correctly the conditions at the property, Mr. Ferguson?
Yes.
And then if we could go to the next sheet, the picture number 5, does that also depict the conditions on or around the property truly and correctly?
Yes, that's the parking area, and you can see the tennis court in the distance.
Okay. And the amount, or strike that, the impervious coverage that is proposed to be demolished and the size of the addition, you and Mr. Marone had interaction to determine that was the minimum amount that was needed in this situation. Is that correct?
That is correct. We actually tried a number of other locations to try to make it conform to the space and to interact with the home. But because of the age of the house and the locations of stairs and doors, etc. The final plan that was come up with appears to be the best answer to the issue of trying to enlarge the house.
Okay, and then just have a few questions to complete on the variance elements. And are there unique and unusual physical characteristics that are peculiar to this property that are causing unnecessary hardship?
Its size and the shape and the fact that there are existing structures, tennis court, pool, etc. on the lot. You know, there are a lot of mature trees and shrubs around the property. There's a lot of grassy area. We're trying not to affect that if we can. We actually looked at this as a means to try to diminish the amount of impervious and turn it back to pervious coverage so that we could possibly build this addition.
Okay, and as a result of those unique physical characteristics you just testified, can the property be developed in strict conformity with the zoning ordinance?
It looks like no matter what we try to do, we couldn't get it to be strict, but we got it close as we possibly could.
To 22.9 versus 22 per the ordinance.
Right.
Okay. And is a variance necessary to enable Mr. Maroney reasonable use of the property, in your opinion? So let me try. It's like say, is a variance necessary to enable Mr. Marone a reasonable use of his property?
I would say yes.
And whether that's de minimis or it's a dimensional variance, either one of those is that?
Yes, that would be correct.
Okay. And is the reasonable use that's being proposed is the addition to the existing single family residence? Is that also correct?
Well, the project altered, what do you say?
No, so is this the reasonable use that's being proposed?
Yes, the reasonable use it is.
The reasonable use is the addition to the structure. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And will the project alter the essential character?
I do not believe so, no.
And
I'm not hearing you. We're having a problem here.
And is the relief being requested the minimum that we afford Mr. Marone relief in this matter?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, and that's all I have for Mr. Ferguson.
By the way, I'm not sure if I missed anything in there. He kind of blanked out for a while.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, are there questions from members of the board for
I have
this
a question.
witness?
John, Jamie.
Hey, Jamie.
Quick question. The asphalt driveway leading to the garage, which will be removed, is that the only access to the garage? And does that mean that parking will remain in the circular asphalt driveway in front of the home? How would one access the garage, by car?
Oh,
or
we're having, yeah.
Can you hear me, John?
I can hear you, Jamie. I can't hear the response from the applicant
Me neither.
or from council. Can anyone else hear?
No, I think it's either frozen.
Yeah, I can hear all of you, but not them.
Maybe we can go back to the big screen of everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, we lost them.
They may be. Yeah. Let's let them reconnect.
Sounds good.
Yeah, we're here.
Oh.
I think you have a bandwidth issue. We're Mr. Kiefel, can you hear us? They're frozen.
Mr. Marone, do you have a way of calling him and maybe ask him to like reconnect, disconnect, and reconnect? That might be the best thing.
21st century issues.
All right. I called him. He's reconnecting.
Thank you.
Ms. Foreman, I may be able to answer your question, or should we wait for John?
No, yeah, let's wait for your counsel, Mr. Chairman. I think
Okay.
Yep.
Are we back?
Boy.
Barely.
Oh, now they're frozen.
Mr. Keeple, if you turn off video, you may get a better bandwidth. So why don't you-
I'm thinking Star Wars.
That's true.
Yeah, I agree,
That's
Brad.
all.
If they cut the video, they may have enough bandwidth to go audio only. They'll just need to identify who's speaking when someone is speaking.
Go ahead. Pick it up.
Okay, let's call a 5-minute recess to get this squared away. I'm dropping off video for a minute.
Yeah, we're off video. Can you hear us?
Hi, Mr. Keeble. It's Kevin. We're just taking a 5-minute recess.
They're back. Let's go. Let's go.
We didn't lose anyone, right? Is Jamie still with us?
I'm here.
Right. Okay. So for those that are participating by audio only, it's very important that you identify who is speaking when you are speaking for the record. Thank you.
You want me to repeat the question, John?
Jamie, yes, if you could repeat the question, that would be great.
So for the asphalt driveway to be removed, which attaches to the circular driveway in front of the home and attaches to the garage, if it's removed, how does a car get to the garage? Or is the garage only used for storage and we should assume there is no driveway or impervious driveway to get to the garage?
Okay, we've got nothing. Now we will take the 5 minutes and have them calmly and deliberately re-enter the video. They may need to just drop out and come back in. We'll take 5 minutes.
I'm going to have him just call.
Yeah, he could just call. Yeah.
Okay. No, I'm going to have him just call. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay, well, that's what John is going to
Yeah, I'm trying to do right now.
He's trying to do it right now. You can always do it.
Because
I don't know if I'd have to find your email. Okay, here's.
Okay, I don't know if we're on.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, John, we can hear you. We're just taking a 5-minute recess right now.
Sorry about that, guys. Sorry about ladies and gentlemen. That guys.
John, I think you need to disconnect your other feed. You have 2 feeds going into this meeting.
Yeah, I'm trying to shut it. I'm trying to shut it off. I was trying to do something on the computer at the same time. Shut it off. It doesn't work. To do connect your. Trying to work. All right. Yeah, I think we're okay. All right. Let's see if we get ourselves back in action here. All right. Can you hear me okay, Joe?
Yes.
All right. So we'll have the questions for Jay, and then I'll have the ones, those several for you, Joe, and get this to the finish line.
All right.
That's for him.
You're done with me.
Okay. It's good. George, good to see you. Brad, good to see you. Norma, you ready to go?
Yep.
Okay. We're back on the record. And Jamie, if you could repeat your question one more time for
Sure.
the witness, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. So it looks as if the asphalt driveway is to be removed, connecting the main asphalt driveway in the circle to the garage. If that is to be removed, how would one access the driveway? And at any point, are you planning to come back and rebuild some type of driveway that would be impervious?
That's for you, Jeff.
All right, so the plan was what I had originally talked to the township about before we got into this zoning hearing, et cetera, was the driveway would be removed and it would have installed a system that's approved by your township that would be put in where the existing driveway is now. It's plastic. And then that would be topped over with dirt and with grass. And that would give enough support that you could drive down to that garage if you needed to, but it would be on a very limited basis. It's not meant to be driven all the time, and the owner was okay with that. That's why we came up with that as a solution. It was a way to get rid of a lot of the impervious and try to get to where we are and solve that problem. So it would be used, but more really just if you had to drop something off or move something out of there. It would not be for everyday use.
So you confirm there is no other impervious plan or in use right now way to get to that driveway with a car?
No, once that's taken out, it's not meant to be used except on a random basis.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Just to follow up, it's Brad here, and I'm probably going to ask Kevin this question. Is that system deemed by the township pervious? I didn't think we had anything like that was allowed, stone or whatever. Everything seemed to be impervious under our rules. Is what he proposing considered pervious?
There are pervious pavers that the township allows that are subsurface, kind of like an eco pave where it is a plastic web that is filled with soil, stabilized base filled with soil and grass. For these types of applications that they are used, but they would be subject to review and approved by the township engineer.
But are those types of systems 100% pervious, or do you give them a factor off of impervious?
Some of them are 100% impervious.
Okay, that's great. You should probably publish that if you have it, because I think a lot of people in the township could use that information if you're willing to do that.
I would talk to the engineer about putting that out there. I know it has been proposed on several properties in the township.
That's great. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Please continue. Please continue.
Any other question?
Are there any other questions for Mr. Ferguson?
I'm sorry, I didn't know that you were done with your questioning for that witness. So is there, I'm assuming we're going to get to this, but is there a replacement garage being incorporated as part of the proposed addition?
Mr. Ferguson, is there?
I don't believe so at the moment.
Okay. I mean, you're not required to have one. I was just curious.
Right.
Okay. I don't have any other questions. George? Jamie? Okay. Please proceed.
Okay, we'd like to have Joseph Marone sworn as the next witness.
I believe he was already sworn, right.
Okay, my apologies. Okay, let's see if I see Joe there. And
Yep, I'm
Joe,
here.
oh, there you are. Could you just confirm what your relationship is to the property? You're the owner per the deed, which is Exhibit A4, is that correct?
That is correct. I'm the owner.
Okay, and could you tell the board why you're making the improvements to the property?
Sure. I have a growing family, 2.5-year-old, a 1-year-old, and one on the way. And I need the additional space for my growing family, who my wife grew up in Radnor Township, and we desire to reside here. It's a great place to live.
Okay, and you heard Jay's testimony. He said that you explored alternatives to try to get the impervious coverage below the 22%, but the alternatives just didn't work to meet your needs. Is that correct?
Correct. Jay is obviously the expert with regard to function of constructed additions, and we could not come up with anything but the current plan that was functional.
Okay, and the neighboring properties, have you had any interaction with any of your neighbors concerning what you're proposing to do, or have received any feedback?
So I know we did mail this notice to 100 or so neighbors, but my immediate neighbors, some of them I've told about this, and I've received no objection from any of them.
And just following up then, we had as one of our exhibit reserved was for A5. You delivered the mailing certifications directly to the township in this matter. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then just a couple of questions to summarize. And as to the matters that were presented by me in the opening statement and by Mr. Ferguson in his testimony, are all those true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief?
Yes.
And you agree with all the requests for relief that are being stated in both the application and during the meeting tonight. Is that also correct?
Yes.
Okay. I have no further questions then from Mr. Marone.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the board? I don't think we have any. No. Okay. No questions from members of the board.
And that would be
anything else? I'm sorry.
No, that would be our case, and I just move for the admission of our exhibit.
Okay, without objection. I do have a question, counsel, and it's probably a little academic, but in terms of hardship, my observation is that the need for the variance is a function of the size of the structure more than anything else. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on why you believe there's an unnecessary hardship in this case.
Well, there's several, and really it goes back to all the nonconformities that predate the ordinance. You have the house from 1885. You have the existing structures that are in place. You also have the mature growth that restricts the areas that you could encroach upon. But in terms of the building, the addition is the minimum amount. And really the hardship is related to those existing structures from 1885, 1945, the existing mature lot. This is a different set of circumstances that may not be a hardship, but in this particular case, with all those existing nonconformities that have predated the ordinance, and really it just being a function of there not being as to this particular item, a special exception provision within your ordinance, I think just the function of those things with time and the way your ordinance is written, that's really what produces the hardship in this matter.
Okay. Thank you.
John, I'm going to kind of build on that. Now, I get a house that's 1885. I get how that could be quaint, and you're certainly trying to preserve the original intent of the land. But I don't know if I'd argue that a tennis court that was built in 1945 is in the same range as a house, nor even a pool. I mean, because I think he's got obviously a tremendous amount of land here. He's almost 3 times the amount that's minimum required in this area. And, but for the fact that he has a tennis court and he has, a stone patio and I think the biggest hardship is the fact that he's so far away from the street. That's the necessary reason for the asphalt, the long driveway. But I think we'd all in agreements that, having a pool and a tennis court is fantastic, but it's not needed to enjoy, the use and ownership of a house. So, I mean, how do you reflect on that? I mean, I get the 1885 house. I get that. But I don't get that a tennis court was built in 1945. We need to preserve that because it's,
Well, and I guess that's the authority out there, and I did submit a memorandum on both the de minimis and the dimensional variance of this. Is tennis court's still considered under your ordinance to be a structure? The pool's still a structure. There was mitigation in the areas that, in essence, there was some give, but there's not a legal obligation to demolish structures to accomplish or to get a variance. I mean, that's pretty much Hornbook law in Pennsylvania. So, like, we've already gone and mitigated this to the degree that we could to not take down structures. But like, if the argument is that you have to take down a structure to get a variance, that's not really the law in Pennsylvania.
Well, counsel, I don't think that's what we're arguing. I mean, you're asking for 900 square feet. Now, I guarantee you could find that if you really wanted to by taking off a portion of a tennis court, along the sides, 2-foot strip along all sides. Suddenly 900 feet, you're in. I think we're in, again, we're dealing with the fact that, we have an impervious ordinance here. It is there for a reason. I can tell you right now, being on the board for 12 years, or maybe 11 years, impervious is the most important thing that we look at, just because we have such a rainwater problem. Now, I could say with this large of a property, maybe it isn't, but again, there is mitigation efforts that can be done to get it down more. I would agree with you to say, hey, Brad, if you need me to take out the tennis court, and rebuild it, that will cost me $30,000 to $40,000. To me, okay, fine, that's a great argument for hardship. But if you said, Brad, I couldn't take off two linear feet across the entire tennis court without ruining the structure, I'd be like, okay, that's great too. That's an awesome argument. So that's what I'm somewhat looking for, is to say, boy, how close can you get to 22? Really, with the property without really, I'm not saying take down the tennis court. I'm at all. You only need 900 square feet. It's not that much. There's a lot of options. I mean, you could put a lot of the asphalt driveway that you're leaving there into the pervious pavers, and suddenly be like, damn, I'm under. There you go. You can put some more stuff in there if you really wanted to. Just so you know, there's an issue with the board of granting this kind of stuff in impervious, just because of stormwater management, and also for the reason that we're not a huge fan of kind of letting people build up to the max, because then you're really limited. You can't do anything else. You can't put a deck in. You can't do, because that's what my fear is. You're going to say, okay, now I need to put a deck in. I needed a deck. So
Well, the only thing I can say in response is that we've already taken what was a nonconformity and made it less
Which
nonconforming.
is fantastic. Yes, I agree with that.
And we are, and I'll just say this, we're so close on the percentages. And if you're asking, what's the stronger argument? The stronger argument here is obviously that it's de minimis. I mean, it fits within the provisions of de minimis. I mean, at 0.9%, less than 1%, that fits squarely within the cases. So if you're asking me which is the stronger argument, it's definitely that it's a de minimis as opposed to dimensional. Absolutely.
Yeah, you could argue that 1% of 22 is close to 5%. And that's what I would argue. So, I mean, because
and I'll just say this, if you were building up,
1% out of 22 is 1 over 22.
And as I said, if we were building up, as opposed to reducing, you may convince me, but we're taking it and we're trying the best we can to take down as much as we can.
Council, I hear you, but you're the one changing the property now. You could be living right now in this nonconformity and be fine and enjoy your 26,293.6 feet, and no one would complain. But the fact is, when you want to pull a permit, you need to get a variance. You need to try to get into conformity.
Not the water.
Okay, I mean, we're trying to get stuff on the record to get information.
And the only
did our job here, so.
One person at a time. One person. I'm not getting anybody. Okay.
Man,
good.
Norma, you have control over this meeting. I don't.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions from members of the board? Okay. Kevin, I do not see any public comment on the email. Have you seen anything?
You are correct. I just checked and there's nothing.
Okay. So at this point, I would ask that a member make a motion to approve the relief requested, and please specify the basis of the relief that you are asking the board to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the relief requested based on a de minimis variance.
Is there a second? Jamie seconds. Silently, again, for Norma's benefit. Board discussion.
Yeah. I mean, I say I'm certainly moved by the fact that it's going down. I think that's great. Is it going down enough? Is my issue. I don't know. Well, it sounds really cool to say it's 0.9%. It doesn't sound like a lot, but when you look at it as 1%, 1 over 22, you suddenly get to that it's actually 5% of what you're over what you're allowed. And I think council's given us some case law. It actually said 6% was too high. So that's my thing is just, and though we do have testimony on the record that the miscellaneous walls and pads includes the shed, the solar panel, and all that stuff. I did some quick calculations, and at least 3 of them add up to 290. So, I'm kind of going. So there's 70 square feet left for a solar panel and some walls that were over 60 feet in length. I'm kind of going. I think maybe maybe the surveyor screwed up and told the owner something wrong, but. It's close. I can tell you that. I'm on the fence right now as to if it is truly de minimis or not. And if it's not, I do have an issue with the hardship and the minimum relief necessary. But I'm willing for the board to try to convince me.
Well, let me take a swing here at it then, Brad. I believe that the only basis for relief that I would be in a position to support is a de minimis variance, as opposed to the showing of the necessary unnecessary hardship for a dimensional variance. I just don't think it's there. I think in some respects the applicant is burdened by the size of the property and the other opportunities there might be to do something within the requirements of the code as it relates to impervious. All that having been said, I am, what leads me to be in a position to support the de minimis variance is the fact that the applicant has taken affirmative steps to reduce the nonconformity. And, reasonable minds, I believe, might differ as to whether they can, whether the remaining 0.9% could be found. I think it probably could be found, but in terms of, is the juice worth the squeeze at that point? What do you have to do to get to that number? I think that becomes problematic. And I do believe the applicant has shown good faith efforts to try to reduce where it has made sense to do so. So I'm inclined to support George's motion on this. That's all I have, Brad. Sorry.
Very good. Thank you.
Jamie, George?
Nothing further.
Okay, let's call the vote to approve the granting of a de minimis variance as proposed by Mr. Nagel. I'll start with Mr. Nagel. Aye or no?
I approve.
Jamie Foreman? Brad
Approve.
DeLizia?
I'm going to go unanimous, so I'll approve it.
And I will also approve it. The vote is 4-0 on the grant of a de minimis variance. Mr. Marone, good luck with your project, and thank you for your patience this evening.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
for
you.
your-
Thanks so much.
Okay, we're rounding the corner, and we're coming down the home stretch. All right. Appeal 3079. The applicant, American Heritage Federal Credit Union, property located at 536 West Lancaster Avenue and zoned C2 commercial. The applicant requests a variance from section 280-51M, as in Mary, to permit a walk-up ATM as an accessory use, and section 280-53 to permit access to the walk-up ATM from the exterior of the building with appropriate and compliant signage. Is the applicant ready to proceed?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we are. Nate Fox on behalf of the applicant and my client, Rich Hassan, Vice President with American Heritage Federal Credit Union, is with us this evening as well.
Great, please proceed.
Great, thank you very much. You've heard the summary of the relief we're requesting, and I'd like to further explain that. There are no provisions necessarily in the zoning ordinance that specifically consider a walk-up ATM a use. The only provision that references an ATM or money access center pertains to signage, which is not part of our relief tonight, but just for reference, section 280-120N exempts from sign permitting, quote, logo and operating instructions for an automatic teller or money access center when located on the machine. The only place, if you run a search of the zoning ordinance, where either ATM, automated teller machine, or money access center comes in. The reason we're here this evening is that being located in the C2 zoning district, there are certain use regulations which include a requirement that all uses shall be shall be indoors with the exception of a parking lot or outdoor dining. We are neither a parking lot nor outdoor dining. Hence, the question was asked by Township staff, what should we do? And the decision was made to ask us to seek zoning hearing board relief. As part of our due diligence in looking at this application, we took a survey of other banks within the, or financial institutions within the C2 zoning district, and found that there were several that have walk-up ATMs as well as drive-throughs. You'll hear from us that we're not doing anything to the property. We're using an existing building, the former Snap Kitchen, and installing a walk-up ATM, hopefully with your grant of relief, at a place that makes imminent sense and in such a way that we don't have to disturb handicap parking, any type of parking, expand on any impervious, or do anything which would not otherwise make sense. Further, as to the question of what is a use, or an ATM being a use, a walk-up ATM being a use, within the definition, to the extent there is one for bank or financial institution, it doesn't say whether an ATM or a drive-through or whatnot is required, permitted, requires anything else, or we should do anything else. So we wanted to come before you tonight because the property is such, and you'll see that the building is located on a relatively small lot, about 12,000 square feet. There's no room for a drive-in, and particularly with current conditions, some folks might not be comfortable doing their banking indoors, and just providing customers the appropriate amenity and convenience factor and Heritage is known for. A walk-up ATM is something that's critically important for them in places where they do have drive-throughs, but even more so in places where they do not. That's a general overall summary. Does the board have any questions of me before we dive in a little bit further?
John, I have a quick question, and it's
Go ahead.
more for Kevin. So, Kevin, is this just something that got overlooked with Citizens Bank and all those other banks that happen to be in this township that have ATMs on the outside?
The one that I'm familiar of, which I believe is right across the street from this, predates my time at the township.
Okay.
So I don't know how long that's been there and if that predates the code. The other two that Mr. Fox and I discussed was the Ardent Credit Union and there's another credit union kind of right across the street. Both of those had drive up, and during the land development process, because those are recent, it was determined that being included under the building canopy, that encompassed part of the building, because the building canopy has to be part of the building. So that was the differentiation for the drive up versus the walk up. I think Bank of America, which is one of the other ones referenced, predates my time at the township, and again, may predate that code provision. I'm not 100% sure on the two walk ups that were right in that vicinity.
Huh. Okay. Just interesting. That would be good to know. I think next to the MAB paid store, we just had a bank go up as well. I was trying to see if they had an ATM. Certainly.
That was the second one, the new one. One's Ardent, and I'm drawing a blank on the second one that was just built, but they were both drive up.
Well, put it on the list to go through with the commissioners that they need to correct the code to handle stuff like this, because it's unfortunate that an applicant has to come and.
That's one of many provisions. Yes.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thanks, Brett.
And to be clear, we don't think that Kevin or the staff has done anything wrong. They're only tasked with interpreting and enforcing the code that's before them. And at the risk of using a very terrible pun, I think we can offer you some literal cover as to where this walk-up ATM is to be located, as it is underneath an existing corner of the roof. And I'm hearing my own father's voice in my head as I'm doing that, as he's known for such things. And I apologize. Thank you for indulging me, and I hope that doesn't make you think disfavorably of my client. But we'll proceed.
Yes, yes, please.
If okay.
Please.
And we had submitted, and thank you, Kevin, for confirming this evening that these were received. Some supplement exhibits. Is it possible to have those put up on the screen? Because those will help us further introduce what we're talking about. And thank you, Mr. Myers. If we can go all the way down to the bottom, what's Exhibit 1, the site plan of the premises. This was the site plan which we were provided from our landlord, as we are not altering any portion of of the building or footprint, impervious surface cover, existing parking. We meet parking requirements. Again, if we were to place the ATM towards the eastern side, we would potentially eliminate a handicap ramp. If we were to go to the furthest west corner of the building, we would be forced with the choice of either eliminating access or circulation on the sidewalk, or placing it in an area that somebody might not feel comfortable using at night. The clipped corner, which you can see to the northwest corner of the building, you see the sidewalk, and there's an overhang there. The sidewalk is at such a depth and width that allows folks to both use the ATM as well as circulate the building if they're parked on either side, to allow for safety, or if someone who is in a wheelchair or something like that, they have room to maneuver to the ATM, use it, and use the larger portion of the sidewalk then to go back to the goal and do so safely. And that's a large reason why at that spot this location makes sense. And if I may, could we go down further into the exhibits?
Mr. Fox?
And these are, yes, sir.
I'm sorry. Why don't we have your client sworn in, and we can do all
Yes,
this
sir.
at once, if you don't mind?
Not at all.
Normie, you okay, sorry. Go ahead.
You do solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
I do. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Rich, if you don't mind, please state your name and title for
It's
for the record.
Richard Hasson, Hasson. I am Vice President of Facilities for American Heritage Federal Credit Union.
And everything I said was true and correct to the best of your knowledge pertaining to our application this evening.
Yes.
And do you see the picture that's in front of the board?
I do.
Can you walk the zoning hearing board through what they're looking at, where the walk-up ATM would be located, highlighting the cover and what I see look like security cameras, and also talk through your opening schedule and why this is an important piece to the success of the branch?
Well,
Sorry again, Mr. Fox. Sorry again. Has that photograph
Not at all.
been marked for identification? I just want to make sure we can place it in the
Sure.
record.
So this exhibit packet, if okay, free to call it applicant's supplemental exhibit packet, which contains a site plan, several pictures, and also rendering of the walk-up ATM, as well as a landlord letter of support. So whatever the board's pleasure is, we're happy to have this mark now, later, whatever's most convenient.
Okay, let's as to the photograph that's on the screen now, why don't we call that photograph 1 in the supplemental packet? And
great.
Okay, I just want to try to keep the record clear. Okay, Mr. Hasson, I'm sorry.
Sure thing.
Okay, this corner, right where the building, that we're looking straight at it, that's where we would put the ATM. I think it would be easier if we went to we do have the rendering to show it, but right there, and you can obviously see that there's
Sure, so if we go to the rendering, which is probably about 3 pages down, there's a picture, an Exhibit 3 tab, and then the rendering, or maybe 4 pages down. I apologize. There it is.
There it is.
So Rich, can you walk the zoning board through what they're looking at and what services are provided at an American Heritage walk-up ATM, and what's available to your
Well, Our ATMs are actually ITMs. That's interactive teller machine, where you can use it as a traditional ATM by pressing the button when you go up to it and putting in your card and getting your cash out. It's also a video teller, which by pressing another button, you could get a live teller at our corporate headquarters in Northeast Philadelphia, who during the certain hours that they're open can actually talk to you right at the ATM and help you transact your business.
And apropos of today's environment, credit unions and American Heritage specifically, even in times of shutdown, were deemed to be a necessary business, and you didn't miss a day due to any pandemic-related shutdowns. Is that correct?
That's correct. We moved all our business to drive-throughs and walk-up ATMs, and then opened up again in June, and we've been open ever since.
And on this location, you recall my summary of the site plan, and that the building is against the property line of the rear, and a 12,000 square foot lot. You really can't have a drive-through. So for any members and folks in the community at large that would need banking or credit union services, this then becomes a very vital component of your business and people's ability to access their money. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So specifically, because I think our zoning hearing board understands what's at issue. And we're going to cover our bases and be respectful of everyone's time. You've explained why this is important and critical, why this location works, and just to be absolutely clear, there is indeed an overhang existing there from the prior Snap Kitchen that all we've done is reclad and make this an American Heritage style architecture and coloring. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And if the walk-up ATM were to be placed elsewhere in the building, is it fair to say you would either lose parking, particularly the handicap accessible parking, have the ATM or ITM at a non-visible place, which lends itself to poor safety or accessibility, and or lose circulation on the sidewalk? Is that correct?
That is correct.
And you've also stated that this, particularly where a drive-through is not feasible, a walk-up ATM is incredibly necessary for the convenience of the members and also the success and viability of an American Heritage Credit Union branch. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And in our discussions, as we studied the area in the C2 zoning district, and you heard Mr. Kachansky talk about other banks, Tompkins Vist Bank at 600 West Lancaster Avenue, Bank of America at 520 West Lancaster Avenue, and Ardent Credit Union at 516 West Lancaster Avenue. Do you recall that each of these have walk-up ATMs and drive-throughs? Is that correct?
That's correct.
So is it fair to say that if this branch did not have a walk-up ATM, that would be very different from the nature and character of banks and financial institutions in the surrounding zoning district? Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct.
And to further put belt and suspenders on our hardship, you've looked at this property, building, and location. Is there any other way to provide this ATM or ITM service other than at this corner without either diminishing your parking or doing something to negatively impact the overall use, scope, and character of the property?
That's correct.
So this is it, and this is where the ATM has to be for the reasonable use of the property.
It's the most practical place.
All right. So thank you, Rich. I have no further questions. Do the members of the board have any questions for Mr. Hassan?
I have none. Okay. Is there additional testimony you're offering this evening?
No, we actually, because we'll provide compliant signage, We opted not to have any further witnesses this evening, and I'll just give a brief summary legal argument and conclude then to move in our exhibits. And I did want to confirm that our zoning hearing board application itself is considered an exhibit and part of our record. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So nothing further, just happy to answer questions and move our exhibits for admission at the end and answer any questions you have.
Okay. Without objection, the exhibits will be entered into the record. I would like a summation again on the hardship issue. I think it's been alluded to a number of times, but if you could succinctly make the case, I'd appreciate it, and then we'll move on from there.
Sure, absolutely. In this instance, the hardship lends itself, both as you heard in an earlier case this evening, that the location of an existing building on a property is related to a line of case, I believe, sometimes referred to as the Philadelphia Archdiocese cases, which considered the existing condition and location of a building as grounds for granting of a hardship. Here we have an existing building against one, if not two, property lines that allows a financial institution or bank or credit union use, but does not provide for all of those things within the zoning ordinance, including a walk-up ATM, such as a typical bank or credit union or financial institution use needs or requires today. The location of the building, the size of the lot, are all things which lend themselves to hardship, necessitating this relief. Moreover, if the board were to grant an interpretation consistent with other land development projects that have considered ATMs under building canopy cover, walk-up ATM is underneath existing roof canopy, and if that's an interpretation that the board would like to provide, that would be acceptable to us as well. And all these things together provide unique circumstances relative to the variances requested, which include the circumstances and conditions being such that the strict application of the zoning order gives American Heritage of the reasonable use of the land, for testimony that this walk-up ATM is within the harmony and the general purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance and does not injure or harm neighbors or otherwise be detrimental to the public welfare, and the granting of these variances is necessary for the reasonable use of the property. And with that, we would rest and ask for your favorable consideration on our application this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. Kevin, I have not seen any public comment on the email. Have you seen any?
Just checked, Mr. Chairman, and there's nothing there.
Okay, thank you. There being no public comment on this appeal, I'd like to have someone make a motion to approve the requested relief, and please specify the basis upon which such relief would be granted.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I'll be more than happy to. I'm making a motion to approve a variance under section 28051M to permit a walk-up ATM or ITM as an accessory use, and section 28053 to permit access to the walk-up ATM from the exterior of the building with the appropriate and compliant signage in conformance with the exhibits in the record.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, board discussion? This is one of those where the banking world has changed, and the idea that everything, has to be conducted within the four walls of a structure in the district just doesn't fit anymore. At least as it relates to a banking use. So I would
say, especially in COVID,
Yeah.
being outside is great. It's a good thing to have.
Yeah, I mean, so where the Board of Commissioners to think about making changes at some point in the future. I think that an ATM use where banking is already a permitted use would be a fine addition to the zoning code, so that applicants don't have to come back. Not that we're trying to put ourselves out of business, mind you, but it's this one. I mean, it's just the world we're in. And I'm sorry. Any other comment from the board? There being none, I'm going to call the vote. Mr. Delizia, approve or not?
Approve.
Ms. Foreman?
Approve.
Mr. Nagel?
Approve.
And I also approve, so the vote is 4-0. Thank you for your patience. It was a lengthy evening. Good luck with the project.
Thank you very much.
Is the branch open yet, or is it?
It opens November 2nd.
Okay. Well, good luck.
Congratulations.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Good luck with that.
We're glad to be there. We've been trying for a couple of years to get in somewhere.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
All right. Well, good luck with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're done for this evening. We meet again on the 19th of November. Thank you, everyone, and have a great evening.
Thank you.